Before we get started with today's interview, just a quick reminder, click the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and ding the bell so that you don't miss any of the great interviews that we have coming up. Now, on to today's interview. Welcome back, everybody. I am super excited to introduce my guest today. Composer Glenda Austin is with us today. Welcome, Glenda.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today. So I'd like to get to know you a little bit as a composer. So tell me, do you come from a musical family?
Only in the sense my parents enjoyed music and loved to sing. They were not trained musicians. They never had the opportunity to take lessons growing up. They grew up in the Depression, and we heard a lot about that. There just wasn't money for anything extra. But they both loved music, and we grew up hearing records, a stereo, LPs, where you stack them and they drop. So that's my musical family. I did have a grandmother that played the chord organ. My grandmother, yes, she played in church, very elementary, but that was musical. We heard her play a lot. She had a chord organ at her home, so we would play it, my sister and I. It was fun.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So how did you then begin your musical training?
Well, I had an older sister, and when we were 3 years apart, when she was maybe in the second grade, she started taking piano lessons from a teenager that lived just a couple doors away from us. And so Gloria, my sister, started her piano lessons, and I was younger, and I was very interested in what she was playing. And I would kind of fool around on the piano, and I had a pretty decent ear, and I was sort of picking out some of these little, two-note melodies. And so my mom asked Barbara, the teacher, if she would take me. And of course, being a 16-year-old, sure, I can try. I don't even remember what method, if any, we used. I have no clue. But I got to start probably in kindergarten. My sister was in, say, second or third grade. And so we both continued, well, for the rest of our lives, practically all through college. She was a music major as well.
How did you get started composing then?
Well, that came about probably from improvising. Always growing up, my sister and I were able to play by ear. And I mentioned our parents, and their era was the 40s, the 30s, World War II. My dad was a vet. So we listened to a lot of these, well, they're old popular songs now. My dad would sing them and hum them. And Gloria and I were able to pick them up by ear. And so we kind of just made up our own accompaniments. It was very simple, I know, but it worked. And, the rest of my life, I would improvise and play by ear. And I would play at school, and I accompanied our choirs. I accompanied some of the musical programs we would even have. The teacher would have me accompany them instead of be in it. And that continued growing up. I played in a pizza parlor when I was a teenager for a summer job, and that was all stuff by ear. And I just continued with my improvisation. And in college, I played in a band, and again, it was everybody improved. I just always did. I played in church growing up, hymns. I improvised on those, always adding to. My dad would say, can you add to that a little bit? Can you just add to a little bit instead of, just play the basic? So it's just what we did, and it's how we played. We had a lot of fun. When I graduated from college, I was an elementary music teacher. So I had a lot of elementary kids, kindergarten through 5th and 6th grade. And of course, we had to do musical programs, and I played for those. I did a lot of my own arranging so it would fit the kid's voice, and I would write parts out, little 2-part soprano, alto parts. It's just the way I've played all of my life. And I think that naturally can go into composing something original.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. I love how you had all of these different musical experiences performing and arranging and playing at church. And every opportunity that you got, you were doing music. And so you continued to build your skills through that period. That's so cool and so awesome. How did you eventually connect with your publishers?
Well, that was through partial luck, but an incredible experience when I met William Gillock, who we all know is a wonderful composer. He was born and raised in a very small town close to Joplin, where I live. Of course, he was much older than I was, but I remember my piano teacher, and I had changed from the teenager by now. You know, we grew out of the teenager, so we studied with a music teacher. All the piano teachers in town, in the organization, knew Mr. Gillock. We had festivals, and he would often come and be our judge. And, of course, the teachers just thought, you know, he walked on water, and he did. We had a local dealer, Lois Bellum, who owned our local music store. She knew him well. He would come back very often. He didn't live here as an adult, but his family still lived in this area. He was a very good son. And then when his parents both passed, he was a very good nephew, and he saw about his Aunt Ruby. He would come back often from, well, at that time, Dallas, to see about him and to visit with him. And I got to meet him. I was, of course, a young adult. I was out of college teaching music. And we just kind of struck up a friendship. I think partially on his part, he'd come to this area. There was nothing to do. And so I thought, well, we'd go to lunch a lot. We'd go to dinners a lot. My husband knew him. He'd come to our home in the evenings. I think he was bored and it was something to do. But that lasted, well, really until his death, that we stayed in touch. And of course, he quit coming back as much when his family had all passed away. But he helped me a lot. And I played some things for him that I had written, and he said, I want to encourage you to send them, and he gave me some ideas, and I ended up, of course, with Willis, which is where a lot of his music is now. Well, most of it is. And that's how I really got my start, and we stayed friends, like I say, until his death. He was very special to me, and he was a mentor. And he didn't hesitate to say, I don't know about that one, Glenda. I'm not sure. But I like C Nocturne. He heard that way back in the Jazz Suite 1. I like those.
What an amazing thing to have William Gillock as your mentor, looking over your compositions, making suggestions, kind of guiding you, nurturing you, and kind of helping you to become the composer you are today. That's just so awesome. As you were on your compositional journey, what were the things that challenged you to become a better composer?
Well, I think, as a composer, you're always looking for what can I do that's different. There's so much music out there, and it's great music, but I think it's hard to come up with something that's not already been written. Let's say it that way. And especially in the earlier levels. It's 10 times harder, if not more, to write something simple than, a big work, because you just have such a small plate to work with. And there's just, Sam, thousands and thousands of these little pieces. That was not my specialty. And I know Mr. Gillock said very often, boy, if you can come up with, a few of these little prowling pussycats or fog, that's what you need to do. Well, he had the magic touch. I don't think I have that magic touch. So that's the challenge to me when I write something. Can I come up with something that's not out there, even on a more difficult level?
That makes perfect sense. And you touched on something a moment ago that I want to dive into, and that is that you have this certain sound to your compositions. It's your kind of unique compositional style. And I love that you told us a minute ago that you had been exposed to so many records from the 40s and the 50s, because I hear some of those really awesome harmonies in your works that we don't get to hear. There's a harmonic language that's far more complex than what we see in some other composers' works. So talk to us a little bit about how you developed your own style, found your own sound as a composer.
Well, I didn't say one day I'm going to find my own sound as a composer. I think my composing is just a culmination of church playing, jazz. I love jazz. I've never studied jazz. It's just from hearing what I call popular music growing up. I don't know how to describe it. It's just the sounds that I like. When I write a piece, I think there's a couple ways people compose. One way I think is a more logical way. You might sit down and you come up with, say, a motive. And logically, you're going to put some chords to it. And you're going to go to a B section logically. But then the other way, which I think I do, is from my gut. I don't know if that's the proper way to say it. An intuition. When I write a piece, I write it all from the piano. I don't notate it. It's all, I sit down. Of course, I want to come up with a motive. You know, I've got to start somewhere. And I just improvise. I do a lot of playing. I'm not sure what I'm playing. And I'll come up with something. Well, I like that. I think I can work with that. And I'll go from there. I never notate anything until the piece is pretty much finished. Then I notate it. And when I see it, I see things that I think that doesn't look right. Now let me see why that's not looking right. But the piece is written by and large. And yes, I make edits, I make changes, but that's how I write. It's by improvising and by ear.
I love hearing those insights into your creative process and about how you base your composition in improvisation, but then there's a careful process of playing and kind of reworking at the keyboard before it gets notated, and then some additional editing that happens afterwards. That's super helpful. That's really cool.
Well, thank you.
What advice do you have for aspiring young composers?
You just have to dig in and try. You have to write something. You have to see what you can put together, how it sounds. It doesn't have to be long. I mean, you can start with a phrase. You know, you just put it together. Maybe as a teacher, if a student wants to start doing some composing, maybe the teacher could just set out a simple melody for the student and have them harmonize it. But you just have to get them doing it. You know, it's not going to happen thinking about it, sitting around. I wish I could. I'd like to write. You have to get into it. And it's not probably going to work for a while. But if you really want to, you've got to keep doing that. And you've got to work with your teacher. How can I make this better? And it's not easy. And I think, you know, you've got to stick to it. That's not easy. You think, well, that doesn't sound so great. Well, keep trying.
Try again and just keep going. Excellent advice. What are your tips for composers who face some of the common challenges? I frequently hear from my composition students that they're facing that blank page and it's just so daunting. Trying to make a start is a really difficult thing. And then I also see and hear from many different composers who tell me, I've started a million things and I've finished almost nothing. So how do you overcome those two challenges? Getting started on something new and then making sure you finish what you start.
I set a deadline for things like that. Now, I don't know if it's possible with students. They're busy with other things. They don't probably have a deadline that I have to get this in or else. But that is how I work the best. I seldom sit down and just, well, I'm going to write something today or this week, or I'm thinking of, new jazz suite or I'm thinking of a new waltz, I work better under a deadline. I've got to get it done and I'm going to do it. And then I clear everything and this is what I'm doing this week. So that's how I work. But I think everyone has to find their own way that they can accomplish the most. And for some of these younger composers, I know they're busy with working, with school, sports. I don't have that, thankfully. It would be hard. I don't know what I'd do.
Well, that is great advice. I appreciate all of that. That's excellent. Through the course of our discussion today, you've talked to me about playing in church and about doing accompanying and composing and teaching. So you've had this really multifaceted career. And this seems to be a very common thing as I speak to different composers, and it resonates with me as a composer. So talk to me about your feelings about having a career where you get to do a lot of different things, or perhaps it's you have to do a lot of different things.
Well, I always wanted to be a music teacher in school. And that was from a young age. I loved music. I loved my music teacher. And growing up, I played for some of my friends. I had a good friend that was a wonderful violinist, and I would accompany her at contests. So we had a lot of fun. I knew I loved the accompanying, and I wanted to teach. I also taught some piano students after school. Back in those days, they would come to your house after school. I was married. I was young. We had no children at that time, so it was fairly easy to do a lot of things. I played for a church for over 40 years, but I loved that. I loved teaching school. I loved the piano students, and I loved, of course, improvising. I played for many weddings, many funerals, I liked all of it. It was busy. I maintained that schedule for quite a bit, but I always knew I want to do all of this. I don't want to just be a teacher, be a church musician, be a composer. I like the whole package. As far as composing, I was not going to be this prolific composer. I would compose as needed, kind of, or just when I felt something. But I knew I'm not just going to stop everything and become a composer, or stop everything and become a school teacher for life.
What do you hope to be known for?
Let's face it, everybody's life is a blip on the radar, right? I want people to know that music is inclusive for everyone. You don't have to play an instrument. You don't have to sing. You don't have to be in a choir. I see kids every day at school with their AirPods in, and they're listening to music. Music is good for the soul. It's good for the spirit. It's good for you. It's healthy. Anybody can be uplifted by music. What uplifts you might be different from what uplifts me, but it's there. So I don't know if that's what I want to be remembered by, that I said that, or I believed it. Let's phrase it that way. I believe that, but I encourage it. And I always want people to know, get some music out, listen to some music. But I think that's how powerful music is. And sometimes we forget it, but the music, there's something to it. It's powerful and we need it. Just remember, it can work for you and it can make you feel better. You know it. I'm preaching to the choir, Sam.
Glenda Austin, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing with us today. My guest has been composer Glenda Austin. You can find her pieces on the new National Federation of Music Clubs Festivals list. Thank you so much for your time today, Glenda.
My pleasure. So enjoyed talking with you, Sam. And thank you for what you're doing to get our music out. For the Federation, the new list is very exciting. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. All right. Thanks so much.